Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Butts-Chester. You guys know what I like to do on my show. Say it with me. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to get you fired up about my guest. I'll be spending time today with Dr. Clifford Fry, and we'll be talking about his book, Is Your Ancestor A Monkey? So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Hello, Dr. Clifford. Thank you so much for joining me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Well, thank you, Dr. Angela. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Now, I cannot wait to talk to you about your book, but we do have a bit of a tradition around here, and that is we always give our guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. We realize that there may be some listeners that are unfamiliar with you or with your work. So, in just a few words, Dr. Clifford, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What makes you, you?
Well, I'm a husband, father, grandfather. I've got a PhD in economics. I've worked in various places in academia and the Federal Reserve. I've had a consulting firm in economics for a good while, and currently I'm an associate director of the Hagler Institute for Advanced Study at Texas A&M University.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that this was perhaps one of the best ways to share your information?
Well, I've published, a lot of articles in economics and finance, but in this particular endeavor, I just wanted to investigate it for myself, and I started taking notes because I realized I had to gather the information and know where it was after the fact to assemble it, and it ended up being a book, but it didn't start out like that. It was just my curiosity.
Now, the title of your book is Your Ancestor A Monkey. Did you find that the title came to you first? Did it develop out of the writings? Tell us the story there.
Well, there's a joke, and the little girl goes in and asks her father, where did we come from? And he says, well, we evolved from monkeys, and then goes and asks the mother, where did we come from? Said, well, we were created by God. And she said, well, Dad said we were created by monkeys. And Mother said, well, that's his side of the family. So that somewhat inspired the title. But it's a serious title in the sense that it's followed by a subtitle, an exploration of key issues in the evolution versus creation debate. And that's really what it is.
Oh, that's a cute little joke there. And it's like, poor Dad's side of the family. Dad's side always gets the extra little jabs there. Poor Papas. That is funny. Now, I like to ask this question of all of my guests, Dr. Clifford, and I try to phrase it the exact same way, and that is, do you believe that your book is appropriate for someone as young as high school? Or do you need to be college age or a little bit older? Do you need more life experience to be able to understand or comprehend what you share in your book?
I think it's for anybody. This is a major issue. Are we created, or are we the product of natural forces that are random, And there's a lot of people that face this issue. I think it's a real important issue, personally. And the book is written. The contribution this book makes is it takes together all of the information that I've been able to find are the key issues on each side of this debate and puts it in one place. And it's a short read. It's not any 500-page book. It's like 60 pages. And it's got citations for the sources. But it's written to explain the issues and let somebody decide for themselves.
Right, absolutely. Now, many of the authors that I spend time with say that there has been a prompting, that they feel like an internal prompt, that they get a fire kind of lit under them that says, now is the time to write this book. Others have shared that their friends have said, I love the way you tell stories, or you're a great researcher. You should share this information with the world. Did you have any type of prompting, or what inspired you to finally determine now is the time for this book?
It started with a discussion with some relatives I had who did not believe in God. And so I was challenged to explain why I believe. It's one thing to believe something. It's quite another to explain exactly why you believe it. And there are some people that view a belief in God as something like a belief in the Easter Bunny. You have science courses that don't allow the mention of a creator, even though they're supposedly after truth. And so anyway, yes, I was inspired by that. I wanted to be able to explain why I believed what I believed, and that meant I had to address these issues that kids were seeing in school about the biology courses that say that basically we were the product of mindless evolution, materialist forces. There's no room for a creator in it.
Very, very true. Very true. I do remember, I remember some of my classmates, when we got to that particular portion, and we're kind of looking at each other going, are you serious? Okay. Interesting. Okay. And you don't, I think that there are some people who believe 100%. There are some people who don't believe 100%, and then there's those who are just kind of in the middle trying to figure it all out. So I think that your book is definitely needed to help people determine which way they want to go there. Now, when it comes to reading your book, I firmly believe that authors help us as readers go along on the journey by putting the book in a certain way for us to fully understand. Meaning, many times it's chapters or sections, and they suggest we do chapter 1 before chapter 2. With your book, is there a best way to read it? Should we start with page first through last, or can we pick it up and start anywhere?
Well, it is short, and so I would recommend starting at the first and following the discussion, because what I do is lay out the issue. Then I explain kind of the main arguments on each side and summarize them for you. But I also have citations in there. It's not just me saying this. I'm really gathering information from scientists and others and putting it in one place.
And I like that you have done that. So because so many people will say, well, who are you that I should believe you? But when you have the citations there, it really does help give that concrete evidence that it's not only your research, but also the research of others. I love that you've done that. Now, what would you say, Dr. Clifford, is the main focus of your book? Now, before you answer that question, I want to make sure I get my disclaimer in. My listeners already know what I'm going to say. If you want to know how the story ends, you gotta buy the book. He's not going to tell the all of it. Definitely pick up the book if you want to know how it ends. With that being said, Dr. Clifford, what would you say is the main focus of the book?
The main focus of the book is to present to the reader the main arguments for a creation view of life of humans and a scientific, so to speak, pure naturalistic, materialistic view of the creation of people. And if I could make real clear at the outset, I have a lot of respect for biologists, and there's certainly proof, in my opinion, of evolution within a species. Like Darwin did his work on the beaks of finches on an island and how they changed with the environment. The only issue I'm addressing here is this issue that we evolved from the great apes. And that's a big species change. because
Agreed.
chimpanzees
Yeah.
and us are very different. I haven't seen too many chimpanzees doing mathematics and debating politics, and in the old Tarzan movies, there was a lot of difference between Tarzan and the chimpanzee he was with. So at a gut level, I want to address these issues in a way that shows the limitations of each side and the fruits of each argument.
Right, absolutely. Now, you kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier, but I want to give you an opportunity to expound on your answer if you'd like. And that is, there's the pure science, and then there's the supernatural forces. There's a debate that's been going on between the two sides. Why do you think that the debate between science and faith have such a long-standing debate?
Well, it's interesting that currently it's dominant in the science circles that science explains it all and through the evolution theory. But just a few years back, say in the 17th century or so, like Isaac Newton, he wrote a book called Principia Mathematica that's considered one of the great science books of all time. Certainly at the time it was. But he wrote more about God than he did science. A lot of people don't know that. And he viewed the ability to do science because we were created by God, therefore shared in the mind of God, and the earth was created by God. And so this ability to understand the earth was actually evidence of God to him. And so then all of a sudden we flip to where scientists say, well, evolution explains everything. You can't even let the creator in because it's anti-science. And it's peculiar because many of the universities around the country have scriptures on them that pertain to a God. But anyway, it is an interesting observation also that many scientists are religious. If you do a Gallup poll, most people believe in a creator. And you go into these particular classes, and they don't want to allow a creator even be mentioned. And so that's an interesting dichotomy in this world. And yet one of them's wrong. Now, which one's right?
Right. That is very true. I've even had some professors mention you may have entered this class one way, but I promise you I'll make sure that you won't believe that way when you leave here. And it's like, well, not really what I'm paying for, but okay. It is very true. So we do need to be aware of what particular perspective is being suggested in the classes. So you are still right there. Now we only have about a minute and a half left, but I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to tell us. You also talk about a thing called a materialist. Can you explain what that is? How do you address that in the book?
It's just that there's no supernatural force like a God that's outside of our material system that's guiding these processes. Pure nature, randomness in the material world over millions of years generated us humans. That's basically the materialist view. As opposed to a creationist view that there's a supernatural force outside of our material world that created humans and the material world. Very different views. So the materialist view is the atheist view, basically.
Right. Got ya. Thank you so much for that clarification. Well, Dr. Clifford, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how can we stay in contact with you?
The title of the book is Your Ancestor A Monkey, an exploration of key issues in the evolution versus creation debate. They can get it on Amazon or where books are sold. They can stay in touch with me through my website or through my email address.
Alrighty, everyone. Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer, get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. My guest today is Dr. Clifford Fry, and we're talking about his book, Is Your Ancestor A Monkey? Well, Dr. Clifford, my next question for you, before we went to break, you were giving us the definition of what a materialist is. With that being said, what do you think are the main problems with the materialistic view and the creation of human life from a creationist point of view? You kind of touched on it, but I definitely want to give you a little bit more time because one says that the other is wrong, the other says that the other is wrong. How do you address it? And I think that my listeners fall on one particular side, but I do want to give you an opportunity. How do you address this in the book?
Well, I look at the arguments by the materialists. It goes, probably your listeners have seen this. It's like long ago, there was this primordial soup, this liquid, and the building blocks of life are in this liquid, and they form together and they create these cells. It becomes more complex. Then we eventually have these creatures that crawl out onto the land from the liquid, and then the creation of all the plants and the animals come through the tree of life. And all of this tree of life shows all of the plants and the animals, including us, that evolve over time through millions of years and through a process of mutations and natural selection is what it's called, or survival of the fittest. But basically it's this tree of life. And the problem with that is right away, biochemists, well, first of all, they can take these building blocks of life, these chemicals, and they can put them in a lab and they can't create life. And there's a biochemist, for instance, named Dr. Sygart that I cite in the book, and he says, look, in order for cells to replicate, duplicate, to create other things, they have to have life in them already. Chemicals don't do that. So there's no explanation of first life in the atheist materialist story. The other thing is they view everything through the lens of this story that I gave you. For instance, if I find a fossil in one period and it's got a small head or something, and I find another fossil, they view these things as evolving from one to the other, but that's really an assumption. The other thing that they have is they have a lot of common genes. We share a lot of common genes with chimpanzees. And that, to them, is evidence that we evolved through the chain of the great apes. In fact, we're called one of the great apes in some of these scientific studies. And there's a problem with that because common genetic makeup, if you have things with legs, then you might have genes that are similar that bring legs to the entity. And if you have a common genetic makeup, there's still the problem of how do you develop from one species to another. I mean, consider science. Nobody's ever observed apes mating and having a human. So we're inferring something here. Then how do you get from one complex species to another? And they say, well, there's a theory of natural selection and mutation developed in this tree of life. But the problem is natural selection is called survival of the fittest. All it does is take the existing animals, if you will, plants, and say which ones survive and which ones don't. You're not talking about creation of something new with that process. Mutations, I thought, well, mutations has got to be the answer then. But then I found that there's Dr. Lee Spetner book, and he said he's never seen a mutation that did anything but subtract from information in the genes. See, in order to move from like a chimpanzee to a human, you've got to have hundreds of millions of pairs of DNA and the information that goes with it. Now, where does this come from? And I don't see any explanation that is scientific, so to speak, in their arguments that explain how that extra DNA gets there. If somebody could explain that to me, I would be very happy to hear it.
Absolutely. And I think that my listeners are nodding their heads as well, saying, exactly. It just does not, there's too much missing from the recipe. And I loved that someone explained it that way. They said, listen, when you're trying to make a cake, or you're trying to bake something, you have to have all of the right ingredients, or it is not that thing. It might look similar, but it is not that thing. You can't make an apple pie without the apples. It might be a pie, but it won't be an apple pie. So I said, I love that. I love that. Now, one of the other things that you touch on is a near-death experience. Can you talk about that as well? Of course, without giving it all away, but can you touch on that as well?
Near-death experiences are really misnamed because they're actually death experiences where the people are revived, but they are clinically dead. And what happens with these accounts, and these people have expressed these, they're available all over the internet and YouTube and all, but in near-death experiences you have people whose soul body leaves their physical body, and they describe what they faced and what happened to them. And they are met sometimes by relatives who are deceased. They're given information about things that are going to be happening here on Earth, why they have to go back. There are a lot of different things that happen to them, but the key aspect, which is always there, is the soul body leaves the physical body. And they are validated any number of ways. There was even a person that said on the third floor on a ledge in the hospital where they died, there's a tennis shoe out there. And there wasn't any way, either coming into the hospital or where the person was, that they could see on the third ledge a tennis shoe out there. It was verified it was there. And they saw this only when their soul body left the physical body. But I would recommend your leaders investigate the accounts of, say, Mary Neal. Mary Neal was a physician who wasn't particularly interested in the religious things day to day. She was a scientist and a surgeon. And she was a kayaker, though, a very experienced one, and got submerged in the Amazon River for 20 or 30 minutes. And she describes what happened to her during that time. But my point is this. These things need to be analyzed scientifically, and they are being analyzed in certain areas, but they're not given enough weight. Because if the soul body exists, the materialists are wrong.
And you are so right there. I think that people have a natural inclination to listen when someone says, let me tell you what I saw or what I heard. A lot of the like you said, are called near-death experiences. They share this information that there's no way they would have known these things. For example, something that the nurse said, or something that a loved one did in the room, and it's like, how did you know that? So
Exactly.
you are so right. We don't need to simply dismiss that.
But the point is, for this book, is that the existence of that soul body wouldn't be there in the materialist viewpoint. It's got to be, it makes it wrong. In other words, in the materialist viewpoint, you and I die. We're a product of a chemical evolution. When we cease to exist, it's dust to dust. We don't exist anymore. And these things have dramatic implications for us as people. For instance, our U.S. Constitution says we have God-given rights. You get rid of God, we don't have those rights, according to people. And then there are the rights that they just want to give us. Well, there are all kinds of other implications of this. There's no true ethics. There's no true ethics. If I can steal and get away with it, not get caught, and I'm just dust to dust, I never have to pay a penalty for those things that most people consider wrong. Well, in a creationist view, you're going to have to answer for some of these things. But the worst part is, people have no inherent value when they're the product of these evolutionary forces. They're chemicals. I mean, I can strike a match and I change the material in the match from one chemical to another chemical composition. And that's what people are. They don't have any inherent value. They don't have any purpose. They're the result of some random process. They have no inherent value. Nothing really matters, really. And this is a scary thing for people to digest. It's a very scary thing because it takes away the value of an individual. So they're teaching something that I think has dangerous implications to it. And, science has its limitations. Love, okay, I think love exists. There's no scientist that can measure the degree to which I love my child, the degree to which I love my wife, the degree to which a painting has beauty. So there are limits to science we've got to acknowledge, and they're not acknowledging it in this area of creation of humans. And I don't think.
And that is such a great example, because everyone knows that you can love the 5 people standing in front of you, and you love them differently, but yet it is the same. It's the same but different, so you are so right there. Oh my goodness. Well, Dr. Clifford, we're almost out of time, but I do want to give you one last question, and that is, we have about 2 minutes left, and that is, if there's one thing that you want to make sure that the reader of your book takes away from having read it, what would that one thing be?
Well, I want them to read the book and evaluate for themselves what the evidence is. You mentioned the cake a minute ago. There's this part in the book called intelligent design. That's an issue as well. It's like the faces on Mount Rushmore. Do you think nature's going to create that even over millions of years? I don't. I think the probability is 0 that nature would create the faces of the presidents on Mount Rushmore. Well, there are very complex things talked about in the book that's in cells that are machines that, to me, are evidence of intelligent creation, not some random process. But I think I've already mentioned the importance of the decision in people's minds. I don't think you are a fool if you believe in a creator. And I think that personally this book analyzes the issues to make you understand maybe some of the holes in some of the other arguments against that.
Absolutely. Well, you definitely, with our listening audience, you definitely have a receptive ear, and you probably have a lot of heads nodding in agreement with you. We know that we have an awesome God. So thank you. Thank you so much for that reminder. Well, Dr. Clifford, thank you again for coming on and spending time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I have so enjoyed speaking with you. Now, before I let you go, can you remind everyone one last time, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And of course, if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
The title of the book is Your Ancestor A Monkey. It is available on Amazon and some of the other places books are sold. And you can get in touch with me on my website or my email address, cfry@tamu.edu.
I love it. Thank you again, Dr. Clifford, for being a guest today.
Thank you.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with us here today as well. You could have been anywhere, but you chose to spend it with me, and I thank you for doing so. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.